Good morning, good morning. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome. I am Mr. Jonkis. I am the METCO director for the district, so I have students from Boston who attend school in grades K through 12, but I've seen a lot of you here. My office is in the high school in the guidance suite, so I also coach boys basketball. Hopefully I'm not a completely unfamiliar face. All right, today we have about 40 minutes, and we are commemorating the anniversary of our METCO program, which has been in Concord for 50 years. Last year was the 50th anniversary of METCO as a whole. Concord started its program in the second year after the program started in the state of Massachusetts. Okay, number 2 is false. METCO students must live in Boston, but they can live anywhere in the city. So we have students in our program that live in Brighton, Hyde Park, Roxbury, Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, Roslindale, anywhere within the city limits, okay? So all those neighborhoods make up the city of Boston. You just must live within the city. Income is not a factor in METCO enrollment, okay? The only requirements are that you live in the city of Boston, you be a student of color. That's it, okay? The program was designed to accept students with all different learning profiles and to really represent a cross-section of the city. Number 4 was false. It's really over 350 hours on the bus, so you're off by about 100, okay? Average is about 10 to 12 hours a week that students are going to spend commuting to and from school. Number 5 was true. There are 31 cities and towns in Greater Boston, so schools like ours. There are also 7 towns in Springfield in Western Mass that participate, where students who live in Springfield can attend schools in places like Longmeadow. And finally, and to me, most importantly, number 6 is false, right? METCO is not designed primarily to benefit students from Boston. The program works best when in our school it benefits students from all 3 communities. So, when you think about racial imbalance, Concord Carlisle is still predominantly white as a school community, student body. And so METCO brings a lot of diversity, culture, different experiences and viewpoints into the school community. And we want to find ways for all of us to take advantage of that knowledge. All right, so give yourself a score, and don't worry, it's not going on Aspen, okay? So I want to introduce our panel. Next, we have 2 graduates, 2 current students, and Mr. Gauthier from the Social Studies Department. So they're going to introduce themselves and just tell you a little bit about themselves quickly before we start. Ryan?
Hello, testing. All right, we're here. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Ruiz. I graduated in 2011. From here, I ended up actually doing a postgraduate year at a prep school, Choate Rosemary Hall. After that, I went to Colby College, where I got a degree in sociology, and actually I'm not doing anything with sociology. I'm working in video production at a finance company, and I'm really enjoying it.
I'm Jaden Scott Massey. I'm a senior, and I plan on going to Syracuse to major in psychology.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Rashida Clayton. I graduated in 1996 from Concord Carlisle. I attended Quinnipiac University, and I thought I wanted to be a nurse, but somehow I ended up in higher education and education. And currently, right now, I work as a METCO director for the Natick Public Schools.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Hamill. I'm a current senior here, and I plan on going off to study pre-med somewhere in college.
Hi there. Is this thing working? It is. Chris Gauthier. In the Social Studies Department, I teach sociology, U.S. history, and a graduate of the class of 1994 from Concord Carlisle High School when it was over there. Now it's just a, yeah, right. So we overlap by a couple of years. So.
Thank you. So the first question I have for the panel, and there will be time at the end for questions from the audience, so be thinking about things that might strike a chord with you as you're listening. But the first question I have for each of you, and we'll just start with Ryan and go down the line, could you talk about briefly the biggest benefit that you took away from your participation in METCO?
Biggest benefit. It's kind of hard because I had a lot of benefits. I would say the number one, be able to, I played football while I was here at Concord Carlisle, and I also played a few other sports as well, basketball, wrestled, and did track as well. I think my biggest takeaway is being able to have a family that was here in Concord, that was willing to open arms. Was like, Ryan, you can stay at my house anytime you need. And that honestly was kind of the turning point for me when I was here at Concord Carlisle, and I'm forever grateful. And funny thing, I actually stayed at their house last night too, and had a great meal. And I think I'm a huge eater, so I love the food they make. So it's not like mama's cooking, but it was damn good.
Jaden?
I feel like there have been a lot of educational opportunities that I really can't get anywhere else if I'm not in the METCO program. And also, I feel like a lot of my friends are from Concord, so if it weren't for the METCO program, then I really wouldn't have met them.
I think there are two benefits that I gained from attending Concord Carlisle, and one of the biggest ones was self-advocacy. I always had an opinion and was not afraid to share that opinion with my fellow teachers and peers. However, I learned to hone that voice for a means of positive change and a way to positively advocate for myself for the things that I felt I needed or wanted to have. And through that advocacy and learning how to advocate for myself, I gained many mentors within the school. And some are still here, some are not. But Ms. Hammer, my guidance counselor, Kay Chambers, was very essential. My own METCO director, and I had a very English teacher, Mara Roberts, who also they really helped me to shape the person that I am today, and really helped me to self-advocate for myself in a positive way.
My main benefit from the METCO program here is I've had the opportunity to make a lot of new friends with METCO students, and it's really diversified my friend group, and it's given me different thoughts, opinions, and points of view that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's really the big thing for me.
AJ, is it okay if I talk a little bit about my research? This might take a little longer. He asked for us to be brief. Those of you who know me know that.
All right, I'll put you on the clock.
I'm anything but. So when I think about what METCO's given me, it's actually in my earliest memories of school. One of my first snapshots, I remember meeting a student named Tammy Fenton in my first grade class. METCO did not start in kindergarten when I was in kindergarten. It was in first grade through 12th. And I remember hanging out with her in first grade because she was a really fast runner, right? And she could beat like every boy in the schoolyard. And she was a METCO student. METCO students were on my sports teams and my classes right up through high school. Also coped with tragedy with METCO students as well. Those of you who take my class know I talk about a student who was murdered who was from Hyde Park my junior year, which was an enormously eye-opening experience for me. So I think one thing to think about with METCO, at least for me, is that it caused me to think about race in a way that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. Growing up in a predominantly white community, I think it's common for whites not to reflect on this a whole lot. The Boston metropolitan area, by the way, is more segregated than Birmingham, Alabama. I'm not sure if you knew that. Whites are the most segregated group in the country. METCO forced me to confront my own race, the fact that I have a race, the fact that there's a racial hierarchy, the fact that I exist within it. It also structured what I wanted to do in college. I went and studied sociology, went to graduate school, and it actually structured my research in graduate school as well, which I'll just talk to you about just briefly. Often as we talk about METCO, we're talking about students of color. We tend to use that as shorthand for students of color, as if they're the only ones with a race in a school in which they exist. So METCO becomes shorthand for all things racial. And my interest was not to try to represent or research the experiences or lives of people of color, but the other side of the equation, which it goes back to the founding charter of METCO, this idea that somehow, going back to the last point that AJ put on the board, that it's really about everybody in a school with a METCO program. Right, that there was as much for people in the community to learn as METCO students coming in. So my research question for my graduate school degree and my dissertation became about what understandings do resident students, specifically white students, develop from going to school in a school with a METCO program? Does METCO serve the purpose of getting people to reflect on who they are racially? Does it actually harden racial stereotypes? Right? Does it help white students see race in American society, or does it hide that, and with it, does it hide whiteness in all of its perniciousness as well? And so through a whole series of years, I did this research at CCHS while I was teaching, still connected to the university where I was doing my research. I actually found some interesting results I'll just share very quickly with you. And actually, some of you guys have set me up for this already. Alex, Ryan, others, some of the things are right in the comments that were right here. First of all, we have a problem in this school talking about race. It makes people feel awkward. And let me be clear, it's white folk mostly. My white brothers and sisters out there, we don't like talking about race. Okay, if you get METCO students together, and I did some focus groups of METCO students, oftentimes they would say things like, it's the single most important factor structuring my everyday reality at this school, is the things I kept on hearing. With white students, they say things like, I don't want to be put on the spot, I don't know, I never know what to say. But not all white students said that. So what I looked at were students that developed close relationships with METCO students, white students who did, versus students that went to CCHS and just sort of coexisted in a school with students of color brought in from Boston. And you can see that difference as somewhat the difference between desegregation and integration. So in one hand, when you develop friendships, play on a sports team, you're integrated, you're actually having experiences, you're talking to each other, you're connecting. And desegregation is just this, this thing we think where you just stick students in the same school together and magically they'll learn something about each other, right? Magically, we'll heal all racial division and so forth. It's a rather naive thing to think. Just in just broad brushstrokes, my research suggested that it's the students, and this happens, we have a lot of students here at CCHS, white students, who develop close relationships through sports teams, friendships, sometimes romantic relationships, who actually learn one heck of a lot about what it means to live in a society that's structured by race. They learn by contrast what it means to have racial privilege and what it means to be on the other side of that. We also have a lot of students, I think, at CCHS who just attending a school with students of color but not interacting with them a whole lot actually do walk away, unfortunately, sometimes with stereotypes reconfirmed. So in some ways, my research supported that METCO's got great promise. It does some wonderful things. The number of white students I had too who were like, I sneak into the city to visit I tell my parents I'm going to the museum, right? And I end up in Dorchester, if only they knew, right? Look, it's not as dangerous as people think. Anyway, so METCO, it points the way forward. I think my research shows that there's some really positive things and also some things that we could be doing better here. So that was a long-winded explanation, sorry.
It's okay. I think, though, that you provided a little bit of a segue when talking about some of the challenges that still exist, too. So my next question for the panelists would be to, are there, for those of you who graduated already, Ryan, you came as a 9th grader, brand new to the high school, to the district, and Rashida came in 10th grade, so their experiences are really specific to the high school, whereas Alex and Jaden have kind of grown up going through the Concord schools. But can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced in the program or that you may have seen students that you were close with deal with?
Yeah. I think one of the greatest challenges is having, for a person coming out from the inner city, I think there's a huge culture shock. I think a lot of folks don't understand necessarily what that is. And from my perspective, it was pretty much, I put a burden on myself that I'm going to be the greatest at everything I do, and I really don't need any help. And I'm just coming here just to do my job, pretty much. I'm not trying to make any friends. I was kind of pretty much putting myself in a box. This box is very limited. I'm not going to be successful. It's going to limit your ability to, it's going to limit your ability to be successful. And, eventually, I think, as I got to know kids, my biggest takeaway too was, I think playing sports helped me out a lot to integrate into Concord and Carlisle, to make friends in both towns, even to make friends in Boston that I never knew. Because at the end of the day, it was kind of like, what are you really taking away from this experience? It wasn't for you just to get education, it was for you to do more with your life, to make an impact on others' lives, and to let others know kind of what you've been through, kind of tell a story. And in a way, that's why I'm kind of back here, because I wanted to tell my story in terms of how I got to where I am now, and pretty much it speaks to the volume of how you guys kind of have to evolve. And it becomes a struggle to say that, excuse me, it becomes a struggle to keep yourself in this box. And you gotta kind of have to break out of it.
One of the biggest challenges for me is waking up on time and getting home extremely late. I played football, so I didn't get home till about 8 o'clock every day. And it really had an impact on like homework and stuff. Also, one of the biggest like challenges I faced is people like to assume a lot about you based on where you live. Like they'd assume like, oh, you live in an apartment, or oh, you live in the hood. Like, and it really isn't fair. They don't get to know you, and they already have these stereotypes before they even get to know you.
One of the challenges, that I face, I think, is similar to what Ryan explained about being in a box. I started here as a sophomore, which was very difficult and it wasn't my choice initially to come here, but I needed the change, and it was a good change that I didn't see at the time what my mother was trying to do for me. But one of the challenges is just allowing yourself to be open and I think vulnerable. You come, you don't know anybody, you don't have any friends, and you just kind of, stay with whom you know, only associate with a select few people. But once I allowed myself to spread my wings, if you will, to get to know more people, get to know students, I found a new world. I mean, I found interest in the classes that I was taking. I found a new love for cultural history. I took a social studies class. It was an elective, and I never knew I enjoyed cultural history so much. But it was because I kind of stepped out of my comfort zone to take something that was different, not prescribed. And so by having that box or that wall up, it really limits you. I didn't participate in sports. I didn't do a lot of after-school activities because I did work back in Boston. But when I was here during the day, I did make the most of my experiences once I let my guard down and allowed myself to experience new people and new classes and new things.
So one of the big challenges for me, which is similar to what Rashida said with openness, was having grown up in a pretty racially isolated community of Concord and Carlisle, the communities, and having come to the high school, I didn't really understand and learn to appreciate the METCO program until high school, about 9th grade when I came here and I was doing sports, and sports really opened my eyes to the difficulties and the challenges of the kids in the METCO program. The early mornings and the late nights when you play football, I've really noticed that, and I've driven kids to Alewife and to their houses, and it really makes you appreciate the amount of how difficult it must be to be in that situation. And for me to come to the high school and not having the same experiences, for me it was really it was an extra challenge to be open to different cultures and different races. And I think that's something that everyone should have the opportunity to do, and to be open to all backgrounds. So yeah.
I think one challenge for me is to constantly remember that there are no, in a society in which race is a relevant category and continues to be, that there are no non-racial spaces and no non-racial moments. As a white person, you can imagine if you enter into if you're a white person, you're in a room full of white people, you might think to yourself, oh, there's nothing here about race, right? We tend to see race as something that other people have. Now you can imagine, just using a little empathy, if you're a student of color walking into a room full of white people, is that really a non-racial space, right? And so to be aware of and see race when everything encourages us not to see it, especially as white people, to be aware of that, to know that that's in our practices, and also to be reflective about putting students in a box, right? That we shouldn't do that. What a terrific burden for students to bear. And we have to be aware of the things that we do that perpetuate that. When we talk about culture shock too, we also have to wonder as a white teacher in a school that I want to serve all of my students, how much is culture a part of how I think about my students and how I rate them and my willingness to talk to them or connect with them, right? And if there are cultural differences, how much of those differences are actually suffused right into the way we do things here every day, right? What we perceive to be normal. And what is it like then to be a student who is experiencing culture shock, who doesn't move so easily within the cultures of Concord and Carlisle? Are we holding that against them? Can we even recognize that? So these are some challenges, I think, for me as a white teacher, again, trying to serve all my students.
Thanks, everybody. We have one more sort of topic for the panel, but I'm going to try to weave it into questions and comments from the audience too. So, panelists, we discussed with the panel to think about ways in which we can make CC a more welcoming community, can kind of raise awareness around our METCO program and difference in general in the school. So I'm going to ask you to keep that in mind as questions and comments come in, that if there's an opportunity to speak about that. Dr. Nuremberg is going to have the microphone on kind of this side of the auditorium, and Mr. Goodwin will have it on this side. And we have about 10 minutes for questions, comments. If you have an idea or a thought, something that resonated with you, it doesn't need to be a question. We'd love for this to be as interactive as possible for the next 10, 12 minutes or so, okay?
There's one in the far back. And there's also one there too. Oh, sorry. Yeah, come forward.
Okay, we got both. We'll go here.
No. Hi. This question's mostly for like the graduates. So like as a minority student, did you feel like you had to go like above and beyond everyone else because the image that you had from like everybody else?
Yes. Not to answer it simply, but yes, I think coming in with that expectation helped to elevate my ability to educate myself, to be a better athlete, to be a better overall person. Because I know coming from the inner city, it's kind of been like, I honestly had two options. It's either I was going to be a part of a gang or I was going to come to get an education and do better for myself, and I chose a higher route. Because honestly, from my experience, it was like you don't like what ends up happening to some of your good friends you grew up with that pass away, and that was honestly hard for me. So I think through their understanding, seeing that happen to them, and kind of coming in, setting expectations for myself, I wanted to push myself to the limit. I didn't want to have a limit. Like they say, sky is the limit. So I just kept on going, and that's what it was.
If I'm being very honest with myself, I would say that when I came here, I just had a very big bad attitude problem when I came here, and I'm just being very honest. And so did I feel like, I went above and beyond to push everyone away from me. I did, and my whole sophomore year was pretty much like that. And it wasn't, so again, talking about that openness and allowing yourself to be open to things, it wasn't until I decided that I was gonna take down those walls. Like my education, like my goal was to just get out of here and get a diploma and move on. I did not have a goal to go to college at all. I didn't feel the need to push myself. I felt being average was okay. But again, through these mentors at the high school, I was able to have my thinking changed, and thus here I am today. So that's the answer to the question.
So my entire family has gone, well, a lot of my family has gone through METCO, and it's been in Concord METCO for a while. And I was wondering, maybe this is a question for Mr. Jonkis, but what is the future of METCO in Concord? Because I've heard stories about it getting better. I've heard stories about it going away. So what is the true future of METCO in Concord?
Make sure everybody, you can hear me in the back, right? Okay. No, it's all right. So METCO's not going away by any stretch. Our program is probably the 6th or 7th largest out of the 31 that exist in Greater Boston. There are some schools that graduate 1 or 2 students a year, and there are some schools, some school districts, Newton, Brookline, Lexington's another really large one, that will have 30 kids in a graduating class. We're sort of in the 15, 18 range per class, per grade, and our program is really strong. We are fortunate that the communities of Concord and Carlisle support it. The money that comes from the state to pay for METCO doesn't pay for the full program, right? Every year costs go up. We pay increases in transportation costs and teachers, and I get a little raise every year, and so those costs go up, right? And the money that the state gives us is the same, but like I said, I feel really fortunate when I go talk to directors in other communities about the support that we get as a school community. I feel really fortunate. And I see Miss Clayton shaking her head here.
Yes.
She works in Natick, which is a smaller community than ours. What do you agree with that?
I totally agree.
Can I add to that? To add to that, I think it honestly comes down to you guys in the audience, because you guys are a huge contributor to, helping to educate others, and the best education comes from the people that you know, because you kind of want to learn from them, kind of want to know how they got there, learn what they're doing, and honestly, you guys are going to help keep this program thriving, because we want to come out, students want to come out here and come to an open group of people that are willing to accept them for who they are, not what they are going to be or the fakeness that they need to be. Accept them for who they are.
And I would also add on to that I graduated in 1996, but I retained and kept all my relationships with those whom I could throughout my years of college, throughout my professional career. And really, the future of any program is as best as its product, or the alums that come out of the program, or the people who have had interactions and support the program. So really, while the school district is doing a phenomenal job in supporting the program, it's incumbent upon you all, as students, that you come back, that you show the results of what it is that you achieve, what you've learned here, and come back and show that the results of what you do. And when people see the results of what you do, then they know that it works, right? And so I would recommend that, you build an affinity, stay in touch, go to your class reunions, give back. Many of you may start to receive scholarships as you enter your senior years and going off to colleges and universities. When you reach that point where you're a little, stable and you can do things, give back to that scholarship fund that gave back to you. Come back and speak to the students and let them know your journey, and maybe something might resonate with them, and then thus they move forward and do the same thing. I mean, I know that's one of the reasons why I became a METCO director, because my METCO director was very influential in my life, and really for so much for the better. So I would say that the future of any METCO program lies with its students as well and its alum.
I would like to just add one thing to that as well. Enrollment is down. When we were here, METCO was about 9% of the population. Today it's like 4.6%, right? The Asian population has actually been going up. It's about 9% now, right, interestingly enough. But one way to think about this is if you gauge the strength of the program based on the number of students of color coming from Boston, then you can see trends, I guess, down because the numbers are shrinking. It depends on how you want to look at it. But if we see METCO as something that everyone is doing, that we all are engaged in, that we're all METCO students, right, then I guess you could say that the program is strong. And if we actually look at it as something to be leveraged, as something to be used, as a resource, right, as a potential opportunity for conversations, and developing an awareness of difference and some similarity as well, then METCO can be really strong. We just have to conceive of it not just as a program for students of color, but for everyone in a school with METCO program. We're all METCO students.
So we probably have time for maybe one or two more, but just in case the bell rings, we have 2 or 3 minutes. During advisory, if there are any Boston students of color who this has resonated with, if you'd like to come back to the auditorium to meet with our alumni in a small, more intimate setting, you're welcome to come back. Your excuse for advisory to be here. So just want to make sure I make that announcement before the bell rings. CJ?
Sorry. I just wanted to say, like, I was really agreeing with, like, what Jane was saying. You know, me and Jane, not loud enough? All right, so yeah, me and Jane came in for preschool together, you know, Christmas Addicts, and we've been here since kindergarten. And with all of, you know, the struggles with METCO and Concord, I just want to say it's, like, done a really great job when I compare it to other towns. Like, my brothers go to Newton, and a lot of other towns don't really have the same atmosphere that Concord has. Like, even with the struggles, it's really amazing. Like, there's so many welcoming people, and just as, like, you know, everyone was saying, there's so many open arms and friends really who, like, want to be there for you. Like, people who want to be like Alex, they want to give rise to Elwife. And I just wanted to, you know, just really salute Concord, because my friends who are in METCO and have the opportunity for education, they don't really have the same type of atmosphere that it is here in Concord. And it's for so many reasons, for, you know, welcoming friends. Mr. Jonkis, you've been here since I was in kindergarten, and, you know, teachers like Mr. Gilman and Mr. Gothard who actually care for, you know, students, and it's really good atmosphere compared to, like, other places that really need to work on that.
I have a question about discrimination. Is that, do you think that race is more important than income? Is that a thing? Like a really poor person and who's white and I don't know, just race and income is 2 different discriminations. Like if a poor person.
So I think you're asking about sort of comparing race and poverty in education, maybe?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Or I think the question is sort of which is the bigger influence on people's behavior and perceptions? Is it race or is it income?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's a double-edged sword, right? I think a lot of people make assumptions if you have money, and a lot of people make assumptions based on the color of your skin. So I would say they're both equally up there, that people assume things about folks because of those 2 factors.
I think we're also very fortunate to come to school rather in a community where people care so much about the schools that they are willing to invest their money, right? Because look around, right? We're in a phenomenal building. We have really qualified teachers. Mm-hmm. You know, we have resources that aren't available, and those play a role in learning. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I think, you know, that could be a whole nother assembly. You could run a whole course on that.
Mm-hmm.
So
I do.
He does.
What do you think is the most problematic habit that the white students at CCHS have that you would like them to stop?
I can speak towards my experience a little bit, but I think it's not necessarily, I think it's understanding your privilege. Because you know, a lot of, I can't say a lot, I would say, you know, knowing some of the people I knew, they were fortunate enough to live in a household with a happy family, everything's happy-go-lucky, and you have money, and you have everything you need, but not everybody has that. So I think understanding your privilege is huge in understanding yourself. and understanding how you interact with others, because you kind of don't want to kind of talk down to somebody because they don't have the nicest shoes or the nicest car or the nicest this and that. You kind of want to understand like I said, understand what you have and kind of be thankful for that.
Also, you want to. You kind of want to understand that not everyone has the same living circumstances as you. And also, you don't want to make assumptions before you get to know a person based on where they live, because it's just not fair to you, it's not fair to them, it's not fair to anybody.
I would just say, just take yourself out of your friend, like make it a point to get to know someone that is not necessarily a person you would interact with on a normal basis. I think and that happened for me. I mean, there was a boy, I've never in my life thought I would be good friends with him, but he ended up being one of my closest friends. And it's because we were in a math class together and we just kind of started to conversate, and we learned so much of the commonalities we had between each other. And it was pure, like, I never would talk to him ever, okay? But I did, and he became one of my bestest friends while I was here at the school. So I just would say, take yourself out of your comfort zone, get to know someone that you normally would not associate with.
I would just add that what a great question, right? So one thing we could do would be to ask that question a little more